Right, so sitting here with Boyd Allen again. This time I'm interviewing you as officially back as a mixed martial artist. Talk to us about the move. Why did you make it?
So, an opportunity came up through EFC starting up again, and they asked me if I'd like to compete, and I said, yeah, I'd like to compete. It's been a while, it's been almost 3 years, so I've missed it. I want to sort of try my hand in it again, and I'm going in against top contenders, so may as well challenge myself.
Yeah, I mean, when it came to weight divisions now again, did you have to think about this, or was it always a set at lightweight?
No, I didn't really have to think about it because I've been boxing at junior middle, 69.85, so to compete at 70 kilos for MMA, it's pretty much exactly the same. So it was an easy decision this time.
And is it the same between, obviously the weights, like 1 kilogram difference, but the MMA weight and the boxing weights, you have to think about that? I mean, because they feel different, don't they?
They are different in MMA compared to boxing. I mean, like with the weight divisions are a lot bigger, the gaps are a lot bigger. So in boxing you get divisions pretty close to each other, 2-3 kilos apart, where MMA is 6-7 kilos apart depending. So I think lightweight was the right choice for me, and I think as I get older I could possibly look at welterweight as I pick up a little bit more mass, that type of thing. So it just depends on my body at the time.
When it comes to rehydration, is there a different method that you cut weights and so forth between the two sports?
Not between the two sports. I think it's pretty much, for me anyway, I cut exactly the same way as I do in mixed martial arts and boxing. So I've got sort of my routine and my structure when it comes to that, and that's what I follow.
I was watching another interview and you actually mentioned Big L podcast that you just as you were getting your foot into the boxing, the supporters were getting on board with you. Now you're moving back to MMA, so to speak, but you want to do both as far as I grasp. Why was the move now the best option for you?
I think just the timing. EFC opened up again, and they've been out of action for quite a while due to COVID. And it's always good to get back onto the first show and open it up with a bang. So yeah, I'm excited to get back and compete there.
Do you feel like you'd be improved in the stand-up department at this stage, considering that you've been doing boxing for the last couple of years?
Not necessarily. Well, yes, my boxing has improved, obviously, but MMA is completely different. The range is different, the timing's different, your distance is different, and you can't just box. You got to worry about kicks, knees, elbows, takedowns, over-committing with punches, that type of thing. So, and the gloves are a lot smaller.
Do you miss the feel of the gloves or not necessarily?
Not getting hit by them, no.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Obviously, yeah, it's quite cool wearing 4-ounce gloves. It's a very, very different game.
You get more bang for your buck when it comes to your punches and so forth. And you always were a stand-up fighter anyway. So fighting a guy like Bruno, how do you anticipate this fight might play out?
I think he's obviously going to put the pressure on and come forward. He's used to fighting guys that are quite a bit heavier, coming from welter or middleweight. So 84 kilos and 77 kilos as opposed to 70 kilos. So I think he'll probably want to force the bully fight, which is what we're working on.
You mentioned that the only concern you might have is that he might need to still make the weight, and are you concerned that the fight will go ahead?
Yeah, I don't think he'll miss weight. I think for 1 or 2 of his welterweight fights he came in 1 or 2 kilos under at 75 kilos instead of 77. So yeah, I don't think he'll miss weight.
And your training setup, is it back to the usual training with Richard Kwan and the team?
Yeah, so obviously going back to the roots, the MMA roots, and starting again, same sort of structure, same schedule, and just getting the body back into it again.
And in terms of your stand-up, is that going to be taken care of by Rich?
Yes, yeah, Rich will be taking care of my MMA stand-up completely.
And obviously, that's what you learned. That's your whole, basically, so you're comfortable.
Even coming into boxing, it was all from what I had learned from Rich. So most people don't know it, but he's a really good boxing trainer as well. And I think a lot of my success was because of what he had taught me.
And now that you mentioned that, would you have done it any differently if you started again in your boxing?
No, I don't think I'd do it any differently. I think I'd work both sports pretty much as I could. Obviously focusing a little bit more on MMA if I'm fighting in an MMA event, and focus a little bit more on the boxing, but still keeping a mixture of both. So yeah, we'll see.
Do you have more love for one sport than the other?
So quite a few people have asked that, but I appreciate both sports for what they are. and being very, very different. I love the art of boxing, I love the skill set behind it, and I've always just been an avid boxing fan. So boxing was my first passion in combat sports, and that's where I started as an amateur. But for me, MMA is probably the most realistic style of fighting, and the closest thing to a real fight that you're going to get under a sanctioned body.
I'm talking about a real fight coming up. Do you expect this fight against Bruno to be a tough battle?
Yeah, I do. I think he's an experienced fighter. He's fought a lot of big names, and I never underestimate my opponents. So I'm looking at it in a way that it will be a tough fight, and that's how I'm preparing for it.
Well, going back now, the EFC, as you mentioned, is reopening. Are you happy that for all the athletes, not just yourself, that EFC is back?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and I know I speak for quite a few athletes. Without it, no one's competing. So we need EFC. We need promotions to start coming up and putting on events again, because a lot of guys still need to build their records in order to either go and fight abroad or compete somewhere in the States or whatever it is. So without a local platform, we can't do that. So we need guys like EFC.
Well, I know that you didn't start there, but you built up the bulk of your career at the EFC, a lot of fights there.
Yeah.
For you, was it an easy choice to pick them as your comeback promotion?
Yeah, I mean, they had always been good to me, and obviously I know them personally, so I never burnt bridges with them. So it's always a nice thing to go back and to work with people that you know. And they show a lot of support towards me coming back from boxing into MMA. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm excited to get back in there and compete.
So how's the getting back? I know you did say you used to roll and stuff. Even when you were boxing, you used to still put the gi on and do some stuff. But now it'll be obviously more often.
Yeah.
How does it feel getting back into that sort of routine?
No, it's cool. I mean, I've missed it a lot. That was my life for 10 years. So going into boxing and focusing on one sort of discipline became a little bit monotonous and not as stimulating, because I wasn't adding in kicks, knees, elbows, takedowns, positionals. So yeah, it's always cool, and it's exciting to get back in there and start remembering the little details that you tend to forget.
This chapter of your life, which was boxing, do you take experiences from that and use it now, or no?
Yeah, definitely.
You do?
Yeah, definitely. Boxing is extremely competitive. There's a high work rate. 12 rounds is no joke. That's a tough fight. So I think it's also allowed me to stay sharp and stay active. I mean, I got to compete during lockdown, where a lot of athletes, especially mixed martial arts athletes, haven't. So, I'm not going to have the ring rust like most people would think, because competition is competition. So yeah, I'm keen.
And excuse my knowledge on this one, but is this going to be a 3 or 5 round fight?
This will be a 3-round fight. So only the title fights will be 5-5s, and this is a 3 5-minute rounder.
And you mentioned in boxing, and I'll never forget, because every time we got an interview, you wanted international opponents.
Yeah.
Would it be the same thing now? Are you looking to some of the local opposition, international?
Yeah, so I think when the UFC sort of opened up the promotion to internationals, became a little bit watered down locally, and the local South African population wants to support South Africans. So I think it's good that they're going sort of back to their grassroots and putting on the local guys onto the events and putting them first, rather than bringing internationals over. Grow the sport locally, grow the fighters locally, and then look at bringing in guys from overseas.
You know this better than me. Is the production of athletes increasing?
Yeah, definitely. I think from an amateur point of view, there's quite a few promotions that are building the sport, and there's 1 or 2 pro promotions that are opening up as well. So I'm quite excited to see where that goes, and we need it badly.
One thing I wanted to talk about as well was Luke Hendricks. He was at one stage going to do boxing, but then I heard on the podcast that he's going to go into MMA now. Is that true? Is that correct?
Luke obviously won and as a pro with 1 knockout and pro boxing, and super talented in most disciplines. So he just decided to give it a shot and go to the IMMAF trials, which is the amateur MMA trials for South Africa, and he's made the team. So I think he's just got to run with it and see where it goes from there.
Did you have an amateur MMA career?
Yeah, so I had 13 amateur MMA fights before I turned pro.
What is the record at amateurs?
13-0.
13-0 as an amateur?
Yeah, 1 DQ.
1 DQ. Okay, so how do you think it compares to because you know like when you went abroad and you fought that guy from Dagestan and those guys have like insane levels of amateur systems there. How would you think the levels of amateurs would compare?
No, I think if you're talking about Dagestan specifically and Russia, their amateur structure is unbelievable. They have hundreds of guys competing and they compete often, where for us it's once a month if we're lucky, and our amateurs don't get to compete like they do. And the numbers are completely different. Our gyms aren't as packed and we don't have the training partners like they do, but it's still a pretty new sport in South Africa, and I think over a period of time we're going to get to that level.
What I've seen is particularly with Richie's gym is that like you all come to pros at some stage and you get better just like training with each other and like you kind of lean and get the experience. Who would you say has been, I don't know, there's a lot of gym partners, but you're like guy that makes you better?
Partners. So obviously I've been doing a lot of work with Don Madge, Martin van Stodden, Chad Honeycomb, Merrick Benjes, Josh Thonders. There's a few guys here at Apex that I train with in the evenings, and then obviously at Fight Fit, there's the whole pro team there. I get to work a lot with Richie, so that's obviously an added bonus. And there's a few guys, amateurs that I get to work with, like Raymond Akut, and they're top up and coming athletes. So yeah, I think the pool and the depth that we have when it comes to mixed martial arts specifically, I'm very fortunate.
And with the fact that you're coming back now, do you notice that the guys are giving you are they giving you a hard time in sparring, or like how does it?
Yeah, I think obviously getting used to the kicks again, and the range and the distance, timing, things like that. You got to watch out for a lot of different angles and a lot of different attacks, spinning attacks, things like that. Head kicks, leg kicks. People don't realize how damaging they can be. So as an athlete coming from boxing, you haven't had to worry about those things, and they completely dismantle you if you're not used to it. So yeah, it's taken a little while to get back into it, but like I said, I had been practicing MMA even while I was boxing, just for the fun of it.
Do you think that this first fight that you're going to have back in MMA, do you think that's maybe not going to be like the best version of you? You might need that fight to break in again, and you know?
I think we'll have to see on the night. I think anything can happen. I think if I turn up on the night, then it will be a good performance and a good fight. But you never know until you're in there. I've always wanted to be sort of the hybrid athlete where I can compete in both sports and compete well in both sports, which I think I've done. And a lot of athletes would like to be able to cross over. But just haven't really pulled the trigger yet, and we're still waiting for that to happen. Where in South Africa it's pretty difficult because of promotions and licenses and things like that, and I think the two sports just don't have the mutual respect just yet, but we'll see if we can bridge that gap.
Actually, funny enough, you talk about, because your mate Chris Thompson, he's another guy that was mentioned to beat the crossover. Does he have any ground game? Does he practice any of that stuff?
So Chris has obviously come and worked a little bit with us, but purely for the fun of it as well. And he's a talented athlete, so he's strong, he's physical, he learns very quickly. So someone like that could make the transition pretty easily. Coming from a rugby background, same as Kevin Marino, a rugby background, they're physical guys, they understand contact. So I'm sure we'll see a crossover eventually. It might not happen right away, but there'll be a crossover. Not to say it will be those individuals, but I'm sure we'll see more of a crossover from boxing to MMA and vice versa.
How do you think you mentioned that it's contact sports, but I mean, how do you think he'd handle? Do you think Graham would be interested in a fight like that? Putting him in the...
I think you get a big name like that into boxing, from boxing into MMA. It creates a stir. You've got your boxing supporters all coming to watch him in MMA. You've got the MMA guys looking at this guy going, he only has a skill set of boxing. But a lot of the guys are sort of looking at it from an outsider's point of view, where they don't see the training behind the scenes. So he could be working his jiu-jitsu, his wrestling, his Muay Thai. So never really underestimate anyone going across from sport to sport, because they practice all the disciplines.
I think with you, it's always going to come up because you did the crossover, right? So the question's always been your direction. Which way do you think is harder?
So I think it's probably harder to go from boxing into MMA. MMA, you still practice boxing, and it might not be the same because of the kicks and things like that. But coming from pure boxing into MMA, I don't think there's been too many guys that have done it, purely because it changes the game completely. You can't just walk forward and if you do, you're going to walk into something like a takedown or a kick or a knee or an elbow. The distance is completely different, and once the guys are too close, you can clinch, tie him up, put him on his back, submit him. So you need to have jiu-jitsu, you need to have wrestling, you need to have wrestling defense, jiu-jitsu defense, submission defense. So there's a lot that goes into it if you're crossing over from boxing into MMA. So it's a lot easier the other way around.
I know this is going to be a question that's going to be asked for you a lot, but Drickus, Don, JP's also competed recently. PK is doing really well in 1FC.
Yeah.
Your ambitions to be in one of those organizations?
Yeah, definitely. I think if I'm going to compete, I want to compete at the highest level. So if the opportunity arises and a promotion abroad offers a contract, I'll take it.
Sure. So, I mean, literally, your ambition is to do boxing and MMA, or just MMA now?
No, boxing and MMA, switch between the two. And like I said, there's not many people that have done it. So people that sort of say he's going back to MMA because he doesn't want to box, that's their opinion, and that's cool. But they'll see me in the boxing ring pretty soon again, I'm sure.
So would you like to do like 1-1-1-1, or is there like a pattern to this?
It depends on the contracts that we get from the promotions. So if it's a 2-fight contract or 3-fight contract, obviously you have to fight out your contract and then sign again for boxing, depending on the promotion. If they offer you another contract, take it. So the thing is, I want to be active and I want to compete.
Is there anything that comes down to momentum? I'm just using an example. Like, let's just say you lose 2 MMA fights and you win 2 boxing fights. Is there any way that you focus on like a particular discipline at that point?
No, I think losing is a part of the sport, and it doesn't mean that you're not good at what you're doing. It just means that things didn't go the way you wanted to on the night, or So I think once you know how to lose, you know how to win, and you've just got to take it on the chin and move on. You can't sort of let it hold you back and hamper your training and your decisions into going into the next fight. So I really think that a lot of athletes should look at it from a broad spectrum and not just sort of tunnel vision. Any
part of you want that rematch against Brandon Tesa?
Yeah, I think we were speaking about the trilogy with Golden Gloves, but obviously having just kept my ears open, I don't think that's the route that they're going to take with the Durant stable. I think they're going to look at going international with Brandon, and I think it's the right time having an IBO and a WBA title. But if the opportunity arises, yeah, I'll take it.
Do you see that? Okay, so him and Rourke now are both going sort of the international routes from what it looks like. Do you see them lining up against each other in the future again?
I don't think so. I think Rourke is obviously, he's 21, he's quite young in his career. I think it's time for him to build, get some fights under his belt, and start competing internationally and look for the big titles. He's still got a long time to grow in the sport, and I think he's just going to go from strength to strength.
And yourself, not a 21-year-old anymore, still looking for the big belts?
Yeah, definitely still looking for titles. I've had 1 or 2, so I'm quite fortunate in that respect, but it's always nice to have a goal, and I think if you're going to compete in the sport, you've got to get to the highest level and try to get to the top and win titles.
I always asked you your favourite boxers and the styles and stuff, and you mentioned a couple of guys, but MMA, I never asked you about that. Who's the guys that you look up to?
I like John Jones as a fighter. I like his style, I like his mentality and his temperament when he fights. But there's obviously a few new guys in the mix, especially in the UFC. Israel Adesanya's got a very good style. Again, doesn't always win, but he's a great athlete. And there's guys like Dominic Cruz, TJ Dillashaw. They're just really good at mixing it up. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fighters that I enjoy watching. But if I'm going to pick a favorite, I'm probably going to pick John Jones.
So here's an interesting question. So John Jones, maybe not in his prime anymore, but he's still beating guys. In his prime, is there anyone that could ever beat him in the history of MMA?
So far, no. Yeah, obviously there's a guy like Khabib who I love to watch, would hate to fight. I think his style is incredibly difficult to deal with, but he's also undefeated, so is John Jones. But if you look at sort of the levels, I think John Jones is still pound for pound the best in the world, yeah.
I don't know if you saw that Twitter banter that they were having, because John Jones is like, how many have I defended, you've come in here and retired now.
And he's not wrong.
So, but I mean, which side of the arguments are you on? Would you favor John Jones in that respect, saying, well, I'm in the big organization, I've done it here, and then Khabib's obviously not done it always in the UFC. Is he right in that respect?
There's certain levels in different promotions, and the UFC is at the pinnacle. UFC, Bellator, One Championship, and I think he has always done it at that high level, and I do think that he's not getting the recognition he deserves, and even now he's saying he's not fighting unless they pay him the right type of money, and I don't think he's scared to fight Francis Ngannou. I think that he's correct in saying that I'll fight anybody if you pay me the right amount.
And do you think he's going to get the amount that he wants?
We hope so, because it would be cool to see that fight happen, and I think if he doesn't, he'll probably end up leaving the UFC and going into Bellator.
Well, if you look at his social media following, it's a huge. I mean, it would make sense. They probably would cover their costs in making a fight. I think Ngannou is the fight to make for him. And who did you see winning that fight?
Still John Jones.
Even at heavyweight.
I think his striking and his wrestling is too technical for Francis Ngannou. And that being said, Francis just has to land one on the button, and we've seen him knock guys out. So you never know in fighting. That's the thing.
Who's your dream fight for you to have?
For me, I'd like Conor McGregor.
Conor?
Yeah. I think that'll be a pretty cool fight.
At which weight?
Lightweight.
At lightweight.
Yeah.
That's probably his best weight at the moment anyway.
Yeah, and I think stylistically it would work nicely for me.
And his fight against Poirier? What do you think? The third fight, I mean.
I've always thought Poirier is a great fighter, and he just had the right game plan. And I think after that, people started to realize how damaging leg kicks can be. I mean, 2 or 3 leg kicks and you can't walk forward anymore. That means you can't implement your game plan. So, yeah, I think he had the right game plan. I don't know if he'll beat him if they fight the third time. Conor's a smart athlete, but he just needs to get that fire back.
And for you here, how's the business going at Apex?
Business is good. The gym's been busy, especially in these times, so we're quite lucky. Obviously, it's not just Apex. We've got Pack Life for CrossFit, and we've got Lift Coffee, we've got the medical suite. So there's quite a bit going on in the facility, but it's growing, and our membership's growing. We've got a great vibe and a nice community, which is what we want.
We're actually sitting at the Lift Coffee. You'll see it in the background. A quick shout out to them. And then Boyd, lastly from you, if you want to say thank you, shout out to anybody.
Yeah, just as per usual, just all my supporters, my fans, sponsors, and just everyone that backs me and knows exactly why I do what I do when I do it. And it's a boxing talk.
Oh, thank you.